Okay, so what is your opinion, your experience as a? Also, before we are recording, because one idea was that we could eventually transform, depending how this chat goes, to a tiny bit of the book eventually.
Okay.
Like this chat about the English / the Italian situation, but then we will see that. So, from your point of view as a English person inside the English culture and as a worker in the industry, what is your idea, your opinion, your point of view on like the corpse, death, and the English way?
Okay. I would say we are probably about halfway between the Italian culture, where people are very familiar and very comfortable, and it's normal to have the body at home, and the American, where there's a very different relationship to the corpse in America. So in America, for example, there is an almost pathological desire to stop decomposition. So everybody is embalmed. It's usual for people to view an open coffin in the funeral home. It's quite normal for the coffin to be open at the funeral. Most funeral homes have cremators, so it all happens at the same place, or they have burial grounds very close by. And where bodies are buried, and it's still the majority are buried in America, it tends to be in a casket in a brick-lined grave. So everything is about stopping decomposition. Here, I would say the majority of people is still quite uncomfortable. So there isn't a strong tradition of the body being at home. Most of the time, the body comes to us in the funeral home.
Directly from the hospital or the house?
From the hospital. So I would say most people die in hospital unless something goes wrong.
Yes.
Unless there's an accident or something like that. We do collect bodies from home. We collect a lot from nursing homes and hospices.
Yeah.
So I would say probably it's about 50-50 between whether we're collecting from a hospital or whether we're collecting from a home or a nursing home or a hospice. There is also a system whereby if there is an accidental death outside the home, or if there is a suspicious death, then funeral directors are contracted by the coroner to collect the body and take it to the hospital.
Interesting.
So if there's any further investigation that needs to be done, then it's done at the hospital, but a funeral director is contracted to take the body to the hospital on behalf of the coroner.
Okay, interesting. Really interesting. Because like, why not the police itself? Like,
well, I suppose because, well, they wouldn't see it as their job. And I think they think that sort of dealing directly with bodies in that way is not something they want to do. Now, if you're talking about a scene where there is potential evidence at the scene, so for example, a murder scene, which we've been involved with once, I think, or a suicide, or an accidental death, or as happens occasionally where the body hasn't been found for some time, then we have to wait until the police tell us we're allowed to go.
okay.
So if they need to collect any evidence or secure the scene or whatever, what would happen is that we as a funeral director would get a phone call from the coroner's office, which is run by the police, and they would ask us to collect a body and take it to the hospital. And we would then wait until they had permission. We had permission from the police to come and remove the body. most of the time, the body comes to us, whether it's from the hospital or nursing home or wherever. There are some subcultures that still have a strong tradition for having the body at home.
Like the gypsies or the travelers.
Usually travelers, yeah. And Darlington is, which is where I'm based in the UK, Darlington has quite a high traveller population. So we have dealt with a number of traveller funerals where we've taken the body home. On one or two occasions, we've had to actually take, or they have done it actually, have taken a window out of the house so that we can get the coffin in and out easily. Apart from that, it's very unusual for us to be asked to take the body home. The body will then stay with us until the funeral, and it will go from us directly to the crematorium, most usually. Something like 78%, I think, of funerals in England are cremations.
Yes.
So,
One quick question.
sure.
From the day you take the corpse and the day of the funeral, average, how many days a week?
That depends. Usually, it does take a bit of time usually to get the paperwork done.
Okay.
Because assuming that the coroner isn't involved, if the coroner is involved, then we have to wait for the coroner to finish whatever they're doing. If the coroner isn't involved, we need usually 2 doctors. At the moment, it's only 1, but that's COVID, a change because of COVID. 2 doctors have to see the body, and both of them have to sign a document to say that there's nothing suspicious about the death. Because cremation destroys the evidence. So once you've cremated the body, and it had to be 2 doctors, because that's how we caught Harold Shipman. And that is actually, it was actually a funeral director that raised the alarm about Harold Shipman and said, hang on a minute, this guy is signing far too many of these releases compared to other doctors. And since that, it had to be 2, so that you couldn't have 1 guy. But since COVID, they've brought in emergency regulations for COVID, and at the moment it only has to be 1 doctor, and they don't have to physically see the body as long as they've seen the person within the last month. So we have some very interesting regulations going on at the minute.
It's a good moment for crime.
Yeah, potentially. So we have once our record, and it was a lady who was over from America. Her mother had died unexpectedly when she'd been over. She knew her mother was ill, but she didn't expect her to die while she was there. And she had a plane ticket booked back. And we managed a turnaround of 3 days. We managed 3 days from the death to the cremation. That's a record. We still can't quite believe we did it. The average, because you have to get both doctors in to sign, you have to complete some paperwork that has to go to Parks and Cemeteries. They have to send another form on to the medical officer at the crematorium. They have to sign another form, and then the cremation can take place. I would say under normal circumstances, it's a week to a week and a half. So say about 10 days.
And the corpse stays
with
at
us.
your office, and
Yes.
people can come and visit it and see.
People can, yeah. They can. We have a special room where people can visit. I would say maybe a third of people do.
Okay.
Maybe that's a rough guess. Might be slightly less than a third.
Okay.
Some of those have seen the person in hospital shortly after they've died, and that's all that they want to do. Some of them don't want to see, they want to remember the person as they were alive.
Okay.
So yeah, a lot of people do visit, but I wouldn't say the majority.
Okay.
Now, this is a personal soapbox. We've just had a big investigation into the funeral industry. As a result of that, there's some new laws coming into force on the 16th of this month, which the biggest change is that you have to have your prices on your website, which we've been doing for 10 years. But we've had to change the format, which has given me a couple of days of serious headache because we have to lay it out in a particular way and it's not how I want to lay it out. And it's a pain. And one of the things on there, this was the thing that gave me the biggest pain. You have to have a banner price for your charges, the funeral director's charges, without disbursements. Disbursements are third-party costs. So they would include the cost of the cremation, the fee that's paid to the doctors for signing the forms. Yes, really. The fee that's paid to the celebrant or the minister that conducts the service. So that sort of thing. So you have to have a banner for your charges without those things that you pay out to somebody else. And then you have to break that down into 6 different components, and you have to give a price for each one. And you're not allowed to say that there's no charge. So, for example, you have to say, what is your charge for completing the paperwork? What is your charge for looking after the dead person? What is your charge for vehicles to take them to the place of cremation? And one of the charges is, what is your charge for people to visit the chapel, to visit the person that's died? And it has to be greater than 0. Which is why you may be hearing from me shortly that we're in trouble with the CMA, because I have basically refused to put a charge against that, because everything that we have always stood for is that people have a right, you know, that person could be in their house, you know, and legally, there's nothing legally to stop the person being in their house.
Okay.
We are substituting as their front room for a while, as far as we're concerned. And we say to people, bring in pictures, bring in whatever you want to have in that room for this time. And I think Douglas said in one of his books that one of the reasons that the body has moved from being in the house to being in the funeral directors is that at the time when it was usually at the house, most people had a parlor. They had a front room that wasn't used for anything except, you know, wedding receptions, or it might be used for Christmas dinner. And if somebody died, the body was put in that room. And it is a room that really was only used for very special occasions. Okay. And houses don't have that anymore. That's something that doesn't happen now. So,
do you agree with this theory?
Yes, I do. I do. My grandmother's generation had a parlor. And that parlor was a room that was only used very, very rarely. And one of the things it was used for was laying out the dead. Okay. And he also said the other thing is that most houses now have central heating, which they didn't have at that time. And that also is a figure. So when we do have a body at home, you know, we have a long conversation with them along the lines of turn all the heating off, but don't open windows, particularly in the summer, because that's how you get insects in.
Okay.
And we have netting sheets that can go over the coffin for that. And we have fans and coolers and this sort of thing. And usually when somebody has a body at home, we will drop into the house once a day and just make sure that everything's all right.
And the corpse stays there for 1 week or more?
Sometimes it's there for the whole time. More often it goes home 1 or 2 days before the funeral. Okay. So it would be with us for some of the time, and then we would take it home the night before the funeral or sometimes the day before that.
It's a very long time, like, because here the thing is the first night, first and only night. Usually everything here is very fast. I'm not sure, I have to double check. By law, you have to be put inside a coffin, like 24, 48 hours stop. It's very fast. When then it goes slow is that if you don't have a spot in the graveyard ready, you can wait for weeks. Like a relative of mine died in Africa. They shipped the corpse here. They did everything, but then they have to wait that all the relatives want a family grave to sign the permission to put this person in the family grave.
Yeah.
So it took time. The thing is, the corpse is already in the coffin that is sealed. It is already like in the cemetery, in a special place.
Now that really got me, because when I came to see you and you took me to the cemetery, we saw that there were coffins piled in a building at the entrance to the cemetery, and that's the thing that struck us as being really odd, because that absolutely doesn't happen here ever. There is no facility at a cemetery to store coffins.
And at the moment, there is a huge fuss in one of the cemetery in Palermo, because there are 100 or maybe 1,000 coffins. Because of course, this organization, mafia, all this, there are strange things going on. But there are like hundreds of coffins for more than 1 year in this room, left there like garbage.
And the first thing that struck me when we got off that little bus was the smell. And that is something that if there was any kind of smell in a cemetery in England, there would be a huge fuss about it. So yeah, that's a big difference.
Yes.
The longest we have ever waited, I think, the longest we've had a body with us is probably about 4 weeks. And that's because we were waiting for somebody to get out of prison so that they could attend the funeral.
Okay. But then you have the corpse, you're open, people can come. Of course, in the night you close and you put the corpse in some like fridge.
Not always, not necessarily. We can. I would say on the whole, that is the most common thing with funeral directors. We have access to fridges and we do if we need to. We're also very lucky in that, it's a shame you never actually saw this place, did you? Our mortuary at the back was originally the garage for the building.
Okay.
So it's open brick on 3 sides, which means it's very cold, which means it's usually about 4 or 5 degrees, which is about the same temperature as a fridge, which means that most of the time we don't need to put bodies in the fridge, we just put them into the mortuary. Where we have a particular need to, then we have access to a fridge that we can use. But sometimes it's a lot of the time, if we have people coming in to visit, the body does actually stay in the chapel where people visit for 2 or 3 days. And we have a fan that goes on overnight just to keep the temperature down. But very often people stay there.
Well, also like in the night, it's open.
Well, it's not open, it's the building's locked up, obviously.
Okay. So,
yeah. And CCTV and alarms and, obviously.
Because the thing, before you told me, like, usually it's less than half of the people come to visit. I was thinking about this because, like, of course, here you have the corpse at home, and it's your duty to come and visit. Like, if you don't come, it's a personal offense.
Yeah.
So, having the corpse at home, you're going to check everybody who's come or who's not.
Right.
You're going to remember. You're going to like make a mental list of who paid respect to you or not. Why in the chapel there's no family control on this, so it's something more personal.
That whole culture of people feeling duty bound to visit and family expecting people to visit, that doesn't exist here, really. So very often when people do visit, it's only immediate family. And the control is with our principal instructor. That's the person we're taking instruction from. It's usually the next of kin, but not always. So, for example, if the next of kin is an elderly person and they're quite fragile, they might say, oh, I'm delegating this to my son or my daughter, and then we deal with the son or the daughter. But they then have control. So they may say that they don't want anybody except them to visit.
Okay.
And in that case, you know, if anybody rings us and asks, we have to say, no, sorry, the family's requested. Or they may say people can sit in the chapel, but the coffin is to be closed.
Okay.
Or they may say, you know, if anybody says they want to visit, will you ring me and tell me who it is? And I'll say yes or no. Or they may say anybody can visit. So if somebody rings up and says, I'd like to visit Mrs. So-and-so, we just make an appointment and they come in. But this idea that somebody is keeping score and is going to be offended if somebody doesn't come, that's just not a thing, doesn't exist here. I don't know if it exists inside the traveller communities, but it certainly doesn't exist outside of that.
The thing is also like, you show respect, but also you show support. Like you go there, you're there, like they're chatting, you bring food, you bring help, especially like in small communities. Everybody comes and help. How, like in England, somebody in your family dies, and okay, the corpse goes to the funeral home. Are people coming to visit you, to give you support, or it's just like the very strict?
I think it completely depends on the family. I think a lot of people will still be going around to the house.
Okay.
And they will be sort of bringing things, bringing food, being supportive. It's just that the body isn't there. Okay. And of course, if they do come here to visit the body, the family that needs the support isn't there. So, you know, it just works, I think, completely differently. We do very occasionally, we did have a little while ago, we had quite a big family, and they more or less took over one of our rooms for the week before the funeral. So they were there for at least 2 or 3 hours a day. We had the door to the chapel open, so we had the sort of front room that has windows onto the street, and from there we've got doors that go into the chapel. Call it a chapel, it's not a religious building, I just don't know a better name for it. And people came and sat and chatted, they had tea and coffee, they had biscuits. They went into the chapel where the coffin was. Sometimes they sat there, they chatted to the dead person, they chatted to each other, then they came out again. And it was very much, I think, the sort of thing that you're talking about, but it was at the funeral home. But I can remember that happening once. Most of the time, sometimes people come in quite big groups to visit, and they'll go in 2 or 3 at a time, and the others will sit outside while they're in. But I think it is a very different culture.
There's also, you have one chapel, right?
Yeah.
What about if you have like 6 funerals?
Then,
are you rotating them? Like,
yeah, basically what we do is we always have people make appointments to come in anyway, because I mean, and bear in mind that you're talking to we are as small as a funeral home can get. We are tiny, tiny, tiny company. A lot of funeral homes are bigger and they have more chapels. So people can go to a particular room. That is probably more common. With us, there is literally the 2 of us that work there. So we subcontract drivers and bearers, but there are only the 2 of us that actually work there. So if we're out with a family or if we're out at a funeral, then the office is closed, which is why we always say to people, don't just turn up, make an appointment, because you might turn up and the office might be closed. So what we do if we have families visiting more than one person at a time is we move the coffin in and out of the mortuary and set it up again.
It will be so weird to call like I need to book an appointment to see my dead relative. It's because with the affinities at home for a short time. So like, because it's one night, basically, you go, you know that you can go, like the doors are open. You don't even close the door of the house. At night, of course, but during all day. And also
now here's a question. Here's a question for you. Given that most people, certainly in cities in Italy, are living in apartment blocks and there's stairs and lifts, whereas here most people live in houses. Most, not all by any means. How does that work with getting coffins in and out of apartments?
By stairs.
People just take the coffin up and down the stairs. And then you'd leave the apartment door open, presumably, for people that wanted to.
You leave the gate of the building open, usually like with flowers, you make clear that something happened. And there is usually a book when you should sign your presence again. I don't know what's happened to the book, because like, I don't know if the book actually like some real role, if people are looking at, I have to ask to my dad and some relative, because I never saw, like, my mother died. I don't think we kept the book. Like somebody spent the day, it's like, oh, we see all the signature. It's, I don't know about the book, honestly. And then, yes, you go in the house, you keep the door open. And yes, you bring in and out the coffin with by stairs. Usually it fits. You must have really, like modern building, there's plenty of space. Old building can be trickier, but still like, eventually you can find new ways. I never hear like call like some special like stairs to, usually like it's normal stairs. You go out and eat like that. Yes, you keep the door open, and so during the day, because you don't even need to ring, but you just come in and out. It's full of people. And during the night is quieter, but so, and then now I don't know about the numbers. Like I talked about Sicilian culture, where like the number are big. It's like when I was younger, Christmas was with like 50 people. 50. It was normal Christmas. One of the smallest Christmas I had, we were 18. It was a small Christmas. So you can imagine for the funeral, you go easily around 100.
100 is very big for us.
Easily, because then for Christmas, it's just family. But then for funeral, you have relative, larger family, and then you have like some more cousins, then you have the friends, colleagues from work. So 100 is an easy number. It's very easy number. I hear about even bigger. Of course, if you are kind of a famous person, like if you are chapel of the university, they're going to have like all the professor. But 100 for a normal person is very easy. And I can imagine 100 people calling you. Can I come to visit? Can I come to visit? Can I come to visit?
No, nowhere near. Usually it can be anything from 1 or 2 people that want to visit. I would say the biggest we've had over the course of a week, not all at once, would be maybe 20. And some of those are the same people coming more than once. But it's, you know, it's not this idea that everybody, it's actually quite unusual for friends to come. It does happen, We do occasionally get somebody that's been a friend of the person that's died that wants to come, and we know that it's okay with the family. They might come, but it's usually only one or two. But it's very unusual for us to have more than 20 people come and visit one person.
20, it's nothing.
Mm-hmm. But then 100 people at a funeral would be quite big. I mean, obviously COVID has totally changed,
yeah, of course,
everything. But I would say at an average funeral, we get maybe 30 or 40 people.
Okay, it's not even Christmas.
Well, let us see. The most people I can remember at Christmas were 3, 4, 5, about 8.
Okay.
But I think families are smaller, to be honest.
I think the concept of family is different.
Yes, I think, yeah, I agree.
More than small. Because like, yes, my family were 5. But then like, you invite like for Christmas, there is my family, there is the brother and sister, the cousins. So like, usually already if you go, like I had a girlfriend from the north of Italy, and for Christmas, there were 5 people. Like for Christmas, we are just my family and the grandma. That's it. Like, no, in my family, like there's the grandmother, the sister of the grandma, and the cousins.
I think most Christmases there was me, my mum, my dad, my grandmother when she was alive, 2 aunts, and 1 cousin. Most of the time.
And then like there is, I don't know about Darlington, but it could be because beyond the situation in the city, and you have the funeral in the small town, in the villages.
Yeah.
And then the number are big, like there are maybe less people, but the number are bigger, like in relation to the total population.
Yeah.
Because then in villages where almost not all, but you know a lot of people because you always live there. At the funeral, the number can be big. And there is all the thing that usually the people bring the coffin from the house to the church.
Yeah.
In the city, usually you go by car.
Yeah.
There is a car and then all the other cars.
Yeah.
But in Christina's hometown, the people bring the coffin on the shoulder from the house to the, and you have all these people following.
That I think pretty much never happens here. There's always car. With natural burial grounds, which is something I don't think you have particularly.
No.
Then we sometimes have carried the coffin from the car to the grave, which can be a little bit of a way, but still not, certainly not carrying a coffin through a town or through the streets. I've never seen that happen.
In small town, I think so, like in popular neighborhood of Palermo. Yeah, small town for sure, because I had a funeral 2 years ago in a relative of us from Christina's side. The show was this, and then you have people that possible like, oh, we went to school together, but sounds like you went to school and then like it's in the same village, so you saw each other like hi at the bar, so you kept this kind of strange relationship. So a lot of people show up at the funeral. Also, and the respect element is very strong in the small town. So yes, the number are very different. It's totally. But then again, about the corpse, somebody dies at home, and the family doesn't touch the corpse, doesn't dress it, doesn't make up. You do everything. Because
Usually.
Here, I remember.
Usually
is the female element. Like, is the gender element because in Sicily, men are useless in the thing of the house. Like my dad may use the washing machine for the first time when he was 50 years old. He never, I don't know how to use it. cooking is the same. Like Christina's dad, he's 70, I think he's 82 now, and he has to his wife to take the underwear. Like, the peanut, please give me my underwear. This kind of mentality, like my uncle, when like his wife is out, he doesn't cook, he buy food every day. So there is this culture that men at home are just unable. It's changing. So I think men, they wouldn't be able to take the good dress, to dress the bed and to clean it. So usually women do that. I usually remember that, yeah, usually before the funeral home arrives, the family has already done almost everything. And the funeral eventually can help with the mouth, this kind of stuff. But usually the family know how to manage it. And the family does. I remember kissing a dead relative. I don't know if it was I was a teenager, so I think it was the sister of my grandma, or something similar. So there's this relationship with a corpse it's not fine, but you learn to touch it. I think it's changing. I don't know how much my generation will be able to organize a funeral, and people younger than me. But usually this thing like family, I always had this impression that like my dad was always like know what to do. Like he was the first to call the funeral home. He knew the way. It was so strange. So the corpse is fine. We keep it. Like I told you, we try to have people at home. The good dad is at home. So you even take the corpse from the hospital and bring it home.
Yeah.
It's illegal. It's totally illegal. But you do. And the hospital knows. Like, because this is the car. Like, also the auspice.
It's again, it's legal here. There is no legal requirement to use a funeral director at all. So if a family wants to, and this is where people do this, they're usually middle class. Okay. They're usually professionals. They've usually got quite a bit of money. They're the people that think outside the box and do things differently, usually. Okay. There is nothing legal to stop the family collecting from the hospital, keeping the body at home, taking it to wherever they want to, a natural burial ground or whatever. There's no legal requirement to have a funeral director at all. It's legal not to. And we did a funeral on Tuesday this week where we buried somebody on their own land. It was a farm, a little bit outside Darlington, and we actually buried them on their own farm. And that's completely legal as well. So it's not because there is a legal requirement. And again, in America, there very often is. It's because people don't want to do it themselves. People don't feel comfortable. They're not sure how to. They don't feel comfortable doing it themselves. And so most of the time it's us that collect from the hospital. Most of the time the body never goes home if it's been from a hospital. If people are going to visit, they visit here. And then it's straight to the, and in terms of preparing the body, in terms of washing and dressing and that sort of thing, again, there's a difference. We are quite an unusual funeral director. We are not a typical British funeral director. We describe ourselves as progressive. So which is a tricky word. The only word we had before that was alternative, and I hated calling myself alternative because nothing we did should be alternative. But we are, as you know, part of the Good Funeral Guide, which is that its whole purpose is to try and do things better. So we try wherever we possibly can to encourage the family to be as involved as they feel comfortable being, which must sound absolutely crazy to you, because in Italy it's the norm for the family to be completely involved, and here it really isn't. So we try to make it easy for the family to be involved if they want to be. So if the family wants to wash and dress the body, then we help them to do that. And again, we've been going for 10 years. I can think of a handful of cases where the family has wanted to be that sort of physically directly involved. We had one where a gentleman's daughter shaved him. We've had one or two where we've had a daughter help to dress, help to put into the coffin. But usually people are not comfortable. They don't feel comfortable. Now, that may, to some extent, be where we are, as well as, you know, just an English thing. There are funeral directors that are part of the Good Funeral Guide, and they specialize. What they do is devise rituals around the family coming into the funeral director's space to wash, dress, prepare the body. And they get enough business to keep going. But most of them are in the south of the country. And I think there is a difference in attitude between the north and the south. And if that was the only model that we offered, we wouldn't still be in business. So there are a handful of people around here who want to do that and feel comfortable. Typically, with a typical British funeral director, washing, dressing, anything to do with preparing the deceased is the funeral director's job. And funeral directing has, certainly until about 10 years ago, been overwhelmingly male. Female funeral directors were very, very rare until quite recently.
Now the things are changing. I know in the US, the number of students, because there you need to have a degree or something, is increasing, like more than half for women. Yeah. But then again, when we talk about workers,
there's a big difference between being a funeral director and being the office receptionist. Yeah.
When you talk about the difference between the north and the south, do you think it's also like economical, or like it's, before you were talking about middle class, people who have money and what, like, they like to do extravagant?
Yeah, no, not here. Middle class is not extravagant. The very extravagant funerals, the ones where you have, you know, horse-drawn hearse, lots of limousines, they actually tend to come out of the working class.
Okay.
And that does seem to be a pride thing, an honor thing, that there is a perception amongst certain areas of working class that that's what's expected and that's the proper thing to do and that's what you should do, even if you can't easily afford it. And that is particularly the case in London, I have to say. Okay. Around here, the middle classes, and yes, they often do have money, but I think as much as money, it's an education thing. It's the people who have the education who have maybe seen more than one way of doing things and who don't have this idea that they're expected to behave in a particular way. So the natural burial movement was very much driven by the middle classes. And it's still very much them that do that. Almost exclusively, I think it's middle class that do that. The people who have really got money, and for example, we did a funeral for a horse breeder around here who was spending hundreds of thousands of pounds on stud horses. So, you know, that family had serious money. Really, we've worked for that family, I think 2 or 3 times now. Very, very simple funerals. Because they don't feel the need to. So yeah, it's all sort of almost inverse to what you might expect. But and again, when cremation was taking off, sort of the end of the 19th century, again, that was very much driven by the middle classes. So
Okay.
any kind of innovation, anything that goes away from what you might think of as traditional, tends to be driven by the middle class, I think.
Okay. Because possibly like very rich people or like linked to royalty or this kind of stuff, so very traditional in their own way. Or like
if you get up to the very, very high tops, then there are things that are expected. But people that have got a lot of money or landed, very often they have very simple funerals. They don't feel the need for any sort of big pomp and ceremony and display.
it will be interesting, a nice research on expression of middle class identity, the search for identity of middle class in funeral or something similar. See how the middle class is looking for their own identity.
Yeah. And I think there's been a huge drive, and from my point of view, the Barrows, that's very much a middle class movement as well, which is now obviously the focus of my research. And again, I think, and I haven't got statistics to back this up, I think it's driven by a feeling that they want authenticity, they want something that's meaningful to them, rather than something that an outside system is telling them is the right thing to do. So, they don't want a church service because it's not relevant to them. They want a service that is about the person's life and achievements because that's relevant to them. With the Barrows, the things that seem to attract them to it is this connection to a sense of history and identity. And nature, and being part of nature and the landscape. So it's very much moving away from what's expected and what's traditional to things that they feel have particular personal meaning for them.
A small reflection on that, because I'm thinking about these, because usually the working class, I have a huge issue with using the word working class with the Italian situation, but working class in Italy, we can call this way, but I don't know. It's very linked to tradition.
Yeah, same here.
While like the bourgeois, we want to call it that way, the middle class, they lost the connection with the local tradition. They have this window to the some way world tradition, in like anything. And like, I think they are in this kind of limbo. Like, they're not anymore local tradition, they're not part of the world tradition, whatever it is. Like, now I saw like advertising for US style funeral. And then they try to create a new tradition for their class. While experimenting, like, okay, what about my identity? Yeah. I think, yes, there is more this idea like personal identity more than class identity.
Yeah.
Like, what does matter to me? Okay, my identity is kind of religious, like neo-paganism. So I do these things, or my identity is like looking for something more personal, or like the environment. They are very possibly looking for new identity, new tradition that they lost, like the English identity of the Italian, the Sicilian identity.
And I think also, and Douglas mentioned this in his work on natural burial, and I think he's right here, that certainly amongst the middle classes in England, ecology and this sort of eco-friendly movement has taken on a quasi-religious nature, which of course dovetails very nicely into neo-paganism. Although not everybody that's ecologically aware is pagan, not by any stretch of the imagination, but it has this sort of giving back to the land in natural burial. People talk about it in religious language. Even completely non-religious people use quite religious language when they talk about it. And that's quite interesting as well. And the extent to which this is a message that is pushed all the time, it has come on to take on almost a religious aura, I think.
It makes sense, totally
Yeah.
sense. Just to go back on the corpse, why do you think people are uneasy with having a relationship? Sounds very bad having a relationship with the corpse, but like to have the corpse at home, to come to see the corpse, to touch the corpse, to watch the corpse.
I don't know. I think this is something that has changed. I think 50 or 60 years ago, we were probably where you are.
Yeah.
So there was this tradition, and in any given street, there would maybe be one woman who usually went in and helped people to lay out and to dress and to wash. I think it is partially because the way industrialization hit England moved people away from having communities like that. So you get very insular families that maybe don't actually interact with their neighbors very much. So you don't get these communities on streets or in villages that used to be there. I think that has something to do with it. I think the fact that funeral directors here developed in the way that they did, certainly after the last war, for whatever reason, I think changes in the way houses were designed did have something to do with it. Changes in those communities had something to do with it. But the funeral director having a room where people come to visit, and that removal of the immediacy of the corpse from the house, I think people got used to. And then the corpse has become something other. Now, whether that's through horror films, I don't know, maybe that's got something to do with it. But an awful lot of people, I mean, I have to say, in all honesty, we've been doing this for 10 years. The first time I saw a dead body ever was 6 months into working here. So 9.5 years ago. I had never actually seen a dead body before that time. And I think that is probably not unusual here.
No.
I mean, when my grandmother died, my mum's attitude was very much, don't go and see, because then you'll have an unpleasant memory, and it's better to have your memories the way she was. And I think a lot of people think in that way. They think once I see them, because we're not used to death, we're not used to living side by side with it, we're not used to seeing it all of the time. For a lot of people do want to see the corpse because it makes it real. You know, you can accept, yes, that person is really dead. But a lot of people don't, because they don't want to interfere with the memories that they have of that person. They don't want a memory of that person dead. And we do hear that actually from people quite a lot.
This is interesting because, like, I have a terrible memory now, but like I saw my mom, I saw my grandma, I saw my granddad. It just like the closest relatives, and my memories are never about them in the coffin. Never. I have memories of my mom, my grandma, or my granddad very ill. Yes. Because my mom had cancer, my grandpa was very old. I remember him dead, but more because it was very sick and was very light. Like, because we have to move it. It was very light. I have memories on my grandma when she almost went back to be a child.
Yeah.
I don't have memories of them in the coffin. We are talking about people who suffer illness. So I think the worst moment was before. I'm trying to remember other relatives. Like, it's the coffin moment. I don't know. At least not to me. I have to ask around. Would be nice.
We do get we get a lot of people actually that say that to us. We get we get some people who almost feel that they have to make an excuse to us for why they don't want to come. And what we always say to people is, well, people are different. For some people, it's the right thing to do. For some people, it's not. You have to, make that decision for yourself. But a lot of people say, that's not the memory that I want to have.
Yeah, but I don't know if it's the memory you're going to, after you spend so many years with a person, I don't know, I'm not sure how. I understand it can get traumatic in certain situation if it's unexpected, if it's a terrible death, but like, I don't know. I think about these 3 samples of sick people and old people. It's not a key memory. It's not to me. I will ask around. But yes, it's not a key memory. But I totally get it. I think it's a kind of a mysterious area about that.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like, it seems like movies told you it's going to be the last memory. But like, how are you going to know if almost nobody have tried?
Yeah.
It seems this kind of common knowledge is actually, I don't know how much like scientific base there is. Yeah, because I don't know. It seems to me a fear based more like it should be in this way. But how do you know? Like,
and for some people,
nobody
for a lot of people, a dead body is a sort of spooky, scary thing in itself. And that seems to be very much a part of our culture. Oh my God, it's a dead body. Yeah.
I don't know how many people will have a corpse at home for one night.
For a lot of people here, it would be unthinkable. It would be absolutely awful.
Well, like, it's not spooky at all.
Well, I don't think so, obviously. But
yeah.
For a lot of people, it is.
Because it's the norm for me. But I think there are so many people, and you are so tired. It's a so long day that almost you don't even sleep at night, and it's the presence of the corpse. It seems to me like you almost don't feel it. I have to ask around.
Yeah.
It won't be easy to ask around to my relatives. But yeah, now I think about like that's like when I think about again the funeral in my family. I remember more the people who come, who chat, who have a nice time together, more than like, oh, there is a corpse of my grandma, my mother there. It's I don't know. It doesn't. Once you leave it, it doesn't seem a priority. Like it's not. Doesn't seem the first idea you come to mind. I can get that if you never went through this, you create kind of a world in your mind, like how it's.
Let me give you an example. My best friend from school, very intelligent woman. She's a judge. She came to see us a while ago. We picked her up from the station and we picked her up in the estate car. And, she said, oh, it's not a hearse, it's fine, sort of thing. And we said, yeah, we have had dead bodies in it there. Her immediate reaction was, oh my God, you've had dead bodies in this car. Oh, it's awful, it's awful, it's awful. How can you bear to be in a car that's had dead bodies in it? And that's far more typical. That's a fairly typical reaction.
But then you have the opposite. When I came to England the first time to Durham, there are graveyards everywhere. And I talked to a friend of mine, and she was so shocked. Like, no, how do you can't walk? Like, there are graveyards, they are so scary and spooky. Like, we're way more afraid of cemetery and graveyards than corpse. Because for us,
we're scared of those as well. You know, lots of people are scared to walk through a graveyard or anything like that. Except, you know, Keith and I were just straight in there, but most people are scared of those.
In England, the graveyards are like parks. Like in Durham, you have everywhere. There's a kindergarten in Durham that was a graveyard. You can see like, it's because like here it's normal to see a corpse. You saw this, the cemeteries here. Tall walls.
Yeah. You
don't go there for a walk. They are far away, more or less. There are other places you just go for death-related stuff. So the cemetery are so full of deaths and pollution, like they're so strong. But like I saw in England, you walk and there's this nice cemetery with bench. You can see inside, nice hills, people walking with dogs. I think they're more integrated.
Yeah, not as much as in some other places in Europe, but and particularly again in London, where you had this tradition from the mid 19th century of the garden cemeteries. And it was moving away, it was very much moving away from churchyards and moving to these sort of garden cemeteries where you have these walks. And I don't know, did you ever manage to get to Highgate?
No.
Worth a visit if you get the chance. But again, you know, it's very sculptural, lot of, you know, architecture. A lot of horror films been filmed there, actually.
I think Marx is there.
Is what?
Marx?
Yes.
Marx is there?
Yes, yes, he is. So we do have that. And actually, West Cemetery in Darlington, I'm so cross that you never made it to that. I wanted to show you West Cemetery because it has some of the oldest trees in Darlington. And it is, I mean, Keith and I go there walking when we get the chance. It is a nice place to go for a walk, you know, with the trees and, yeah, as you say, benches. A lot of, you know, it's, kids would dare each other to go in and sit drinking there at night. So we do have that, you know, people being scared of, oh, it's a spooky graveyard, but probably not to the same extent. And we do have these sort of nice curated spaces. So yeah, they're not as taboo as they are in Italy, but there again, if I come back to my first overwhelming impression of the cemetery in Palermo was the smell. Now that would put people off going there recreationally. I
never noticed.
No, because Keith and I both looked at each other and said, you know, is that what I think it is? And we said, yeah, it really is. And it's like, oh my God. And it was coming from this big building where the coffins were. It was also coming from some of the little mausoleums.
Oh yeah.
So you know, presumably the coffin is above ground in some of these boxes. Yes. And you can smell it. And to us, certainly that was really noticeable. And that is something that would perhaps stop that from being a social space. Whereas that never happens in England, because you don't have that space where the coffins are stored. The coffins, even in a table grave, are at least 6 feet under the ground. Yeah. So you don't get a smell at all. And that also probably feeds into it being used as a recreational space that you can sort of go for a walk.
Here there is no ground. Like you can have like above the ground, there is just the marble covering. So you have this marble panel covering, and then there's a coffin. The coffin, it's sealed. Like there are a lot of regulation about that.
Sealed coffins are not airtight. I can tell you that for a fact.
And then when they're like under the ground, again, it's just like there's a marble over, take it away, and give a hole with shelves.
Right.
So there's just a coffin in the middle covering the smell. I never noticed, but I go into cemeteries only for funerals. My dad goes often because he goes to visit relatives, and now they're going to be the 2nd of November that they're dead. It's fine, but
That's interesting. What happens in cemeteries on the 2nd of November then? Because there is this is another difference, because in England, nothing, absolutely nothing.
It's more Mediterranean Spanish thing, because the connection between Mexico and Sicily is Spain.
Yeah.
You go there, you clean, you talk, you can eat something, you take care of your family, you go visit. The thing is also a thing at home. I think now it's way more common than going to the cemetery. But at home, the kids wake up, you give them gift from dead relatives. Gift and sweets. They are gift from the dead relatives. And then you find also in the city, fairs with toys, candies, like it's, you should also go to the cemetery to pay a visit, to have a relationship with these relatives. I think now is, in all honesty, I don't know how strong is the tradition now. The fairs are still going on for the dead of the day, of the dead. I know people are still giving gifts to the children. Going to the cemetery, I don't know much. This 2nd of November we are going, I think. It's also Jonah's birthday. I'm going to pay attention to the age of the people there. Because there's this thing there, usually you have the corpse at home, but once it goes to the cemetery, the separation is very strong. I know my dad, who goes a lot to the cemetery, but usually people don't. It's not something common. Of course, you have a lot of old people going, but it's not. If it's something fresh, possibly, but I think it's a minority of people who goes visit cemetery normally, outside anniversaries or certain specific days. Who go normally to visit or just go around is a huge minority. It's a huge minority. Because then here we have, I don't know, Anglican Church does it. We have a remembrance mass. So after 3 months, I think then is after 1 year, and then 3 years. It's a kind of a second burial in some way. When you have this specific mass for, you ask to the priest to please tell the mass also for my son, husband, wife, and you tell to the relative and friends. Very few people go there. In the middle of the mass, okay, we pray also for Rosaria Di Maio. We have these, but usually, yes, during the year, that is a huge taboo here. People don't go to the cemetery normally. There's the 2nd of November. I think it's dying too. Next time you come for the 2nd of November.
Yeah,
it could be a very nice experience.
Yeah,
be very interesting for you. But no, it's fun. We are fine with the corpse. Again, we are fine with the corpse in a specific setting.
Yeah,
It's our relative at home. That we're fine. I don't think we'll be fine finding a corpse around, or it's a no person, or it's not a relative, or it's the hospital. But at least at home, it's fine. But after it, no, like that goes back to be a huge taboo. We don't talk about it. We don't touch it. Like here, this feel like you were talking about your friend. Also here, when you see ours, the name is ours, the car of with the coffin.
Yeah, hearse.
Hearse. If you see a hearse, especially if it's empty, you touch yourself.
Yeah, you've told me that before.
If it's empty, it can be for you.
It's for you. Yeah, that makes sense.
If it's full, it's not much danger. It's already full, but it's empty. So again, like I have friends been shocked for me just walking around the graveyard in UK with this huge taboo of that, but I don't know, the corpse of a loved one at home is still fine. It's still, I think, because until that moment, it's still part of the family.
Yeah. Once
it goes in the cemetery, it's afterlife. It's a new status, a new community. It's not family anymore. It's family, but it's a different kind of family.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
There's a change of status starts when it goes in the grave, or at least once it's in the cemetery. That changes the status of the person. It's dead. You have a different relationship. So the 2nd of November day, you can, for the rest of the year, yeah, no. It's a different world. It's totally different world, separate from normal life. It is so, like, we have very tall walls. It's very hard to see from outside what is inside of the cemetery. It's a strong separation, yes. Yeah. It's strange because we are very superstitious culture. South Italy is very famous because superstitious. Of course, ghosts and all this kind of stuff. But so far it's part of the family, it's fine. I think so. So far it's part of the family, so it's at home. It's a safe, it's fine. There is nothing to worry about it. I will put it this way. Well, it seems like in England, it's not safe. Like, it's not considered safe.
No.
Again, because I think it's mysterious, it's exotic, and there's all this filter of, I wouldn't say pop culture, but like their ideas.
Yeah, there is a lot of that, and this idea that a body is something that is inherently scary.
It is scary, and I think there's also an idea, I found this very British, idea of what is modern, what is civilized.
Mm-hmm.
Modern people don't have the corpse at home. Modern people hire professional. Modern people die in hospital. Modern people pay somebody to do this kind of job. I don't know, I think there is this kind, because I already had this image of England, very fascinated by the idea of being modern. I think you're one of the first, I think for the Industrial Revolution, like,
yeah,
it's here, like, to have a kind of climate to be like very modern in the way of living, in the way of dying, in the way of eating. So I think possibly you were one of the first country with microwaves.
Yeah, probably.
And that deeply changed your culture. You love your microwave. You love your.
Yeah, I think one of the things we came away from Palermo thinking was that you have a very different relationship to food than we do. Very different.
So I think this thing like, okay, we must be modern, so we forgot about tradition. And being modern mean like,
I think most people don't even really think about tradition. It's not that they're consciously trying to get away from it.
yeah,
They just don't think about it.
It's just like, it's like the food in England. I think that parallel with food, it can work. You have a very interesting food tradition. You just don't think about it.
Yeah, it's not important.
It's not important. You accepted food from Tesco. Tesco is giving ready-made food, fine.
Because you have to eat quickly. It's sort of at the bottom. Very often you have to eat quickly. You don't have time. And that is what, give you an example. When we were in Palermo and we were running horrendously late because Keith and I had spent loads of time looking at something and we needed to get on to the next place quickly.
Oh,
and
yes.
We said, right, we'll skip lunch then. We just won't have lunch. And you looked at us like we'd just suggested murdering a baby. It was like, no, we're having lunch. And I think that sums up the difference, really.
Yeah, it's important. Lunch is important. It's again about staying together. It's a spirit. My granddad used to say that when you're eating, you don't get old.
Mm.
So you should take your time. There is no reason to be in a hurry when you are eating with friends and relatives. Take your time. It's a nice moment. You shouldn't hurry it. It would be very interesting. A nice connection between the cooperative, the evil one, and Tesco. Because I wouldn't compare you to Tesco. But I don't know, this link with this idea of being modern, you pay a professional to cook your food. At the same time, you pay a professional to cook your dead relative. And with the cremation, the metaphor is perfect. You don't waste time.
That's it, exactly. It's all about time.
It's
about working time. And I think we have a different relationship to work as well. And it's one that's very unhealthy. And it's one that's sort of, again, come out of this industrial revolution tradition, that if you are not busy, then that is a moral failing.
Yes.
And it's something that very much comes out of Weber, I think.
Mm.
And it's something that sort of Protestant with a small p, because Protestantism has been a huge influence on our culture, even for people that are not religious. This Protestant work ethic is so invasive in Britain that it is the top virtue. The big virtue is to be busy all the time. And it's to say, oh, I didn't have time for lunch today. That is almost a moral virtue. And that is the huge difference, I think, between your culture and mine. And I think it also filters into the way we treat the dead.
I can see the book. Like,
there you go, joint authorship.
Ready-made meals, ready-made cremation, or something similar. Because, like, yes, for us, work is not a priority. But then there is a feel like family comes first. And making food sometimes, often, is act of love to the people you're cooking for. Like, still, like, my father used to work at the university, and I know he used to have huge lunch at the office. I think this is unthinkable in UK. You have your sandwich with chips, and that's it. My father telling me sometime, I don't know how much was legal over this. Like, in the office at the university, they have a kitchen, and there were people bringing fish, fresh fish. Mm-hmm. And they were cooking for all the floor and eating all together. Mm. Not every day, of course. There was sometime like, oh, look, I have this amazing fish, very fresh. I will bring it home. We're going to eat together. Today, I went to the fish shop, the fish sellers, to buy some fish for tonight. And there were a couple of colleagues buying fish. And they bought 120 euros pound of worth of fish, and they have it send it to the office. So they were preparing something at the office. So yes, job is important, but it's not, I think, more important. And yes, I can see a strong, again, modern people don't cook because we're busy doing something else, or because cooking now with the movies, not with the movie, with the TV program is changed a bit, but cooking like fast. There is a microwave. Microwave is very modern. Or having Tesco, buying food from Tesco is very modern. I think with the funeral is happening something similar. Douglas told me about pure cremation.
Yeah,
It's
direct cremation.
It seems like it's fast food, like fast food for funerals.
Again, for some people, it removes the need completely to interact with the death. Having said that, in my experience, now you've got me on here, you'll get me on one of the biggest funeral companies, Dignity,
okay,
are claiming that they invented direct cremation about 3 years ago. We've been doing it since we started for people that want it. In my experience, most people that have direct cremation have it because the person that died wanted it, not because they want it.
Okay.
So it's sort of the ultimate expression of, oh, throw me in a rubbish bag, don't waste time and money on me. And we hear that so often. And very often we have people that sometimes they are quite uncomfortable with the idea of direct cremation, but it's what so-and-so wanted, so we're going to do it. There's been a lot of talk about it being popular because it's cheaper. I don't think I have ever come across, and again, we're a tiny company, what do we know? I've never come across somebody who has chosen it because of money.
How much cheaper?
Usually about, well, I'm talking about our prices, so it's hard to tell. Potentially thousands.
Okay, okay, it's way
so
cheaper.
The average for a direct cremation now, I would say, is about £1,500.
Like, also this is also very modern way of thinking. It's very modern to think that death is not important. It's not a change. Like, we're just dead. We are atoms. This is very like modern way of thinking.
Yeah.
It's
but I think also the direct cremation, I think for some people stops them having to really properly engage with the death and almost carry on as normal. Because potentially with direct cremation, somebody dies in hospital, you contact a funeral director, you say, I want to arrange a direct cremation. The ones that we've done recently have been people that have died in Darlington, whose closest family are in London, or in one case, America. So nobody's going to be able to get there for the funeral. Sometimes there hasn't been a close relationship at all. So for example, in one case, we were dealing with a guy in America who was dealing with his brother's death in Darlington. And literally what we did was we collected the body from hospital. We took it to the crematorium for cremation. And then we sent the ashes by courier to a graveyard in London. The cremated remains were buried in a family grave, and then the cemetery sent photographs to us to send to the guy in America. So, you know, his involvement was one Zoom call with me, and then some paying, obviously, and then some photographs saying, you know, it's happened. Here's the photograph to say it's happened.
Now I have a tricky question. Feel free to don't answer. But I don't want something about the value. Like, I don't want to express your opinion on the value of this, but like more about the concept. Do you think is this good for people? is this helping them to have a healthy grieving process? Or like, do you feel like
I think for some people it must do. I wouldn't want it for anybody in my family. I think is the best I can say. It wouldn't do it for me. For me, but there again, I have more involvement with death than the average person in this country. But for me, I would not want my mum or my dad or Keith's dad to have a direct cremation. That it wouldn't feel right. The message that is very much behind it, if you look at advertising for it, and there's a lot of advertising for it at the minute on the TV, there's at least 3 companies that are advertising quite energetically on TV for direct cremation. Pure Cremation is one of those companies. Simplicity is another, and Memoria is another.
Simplicity is a good name.
Yeah, that's Dignity. Simplicity is the name that Dignity, which is the big funeral company, gives to its. But for this country, Simplicity really is a good name because it's all about, and I don't know, I've seen a lot of stuff suggesting that this is because of the war. But there is a huge feeling, particularly around death, of not making a fuss. We don't want it to be a fuss. We want it done quickly, simply, cleanly. And direct cremation, I suppose, is the absolute ultimate expression of that. It's, you know, it's all done, no fuss, no huge expense. I'm thinking of one of the adverts on TV for this. I don't want my family to have to make those decisions. I don't want them to have to worry about it. You know, I will disappear. My corpse will disappear. And then you go and have a party. And that's the way it's being presented. That's the message that's being presented to it.
I wonder if it's creating some trauma. Like in 20 years, we're going to have a series of people like with.
I don't know. I genuinely don't know.
Finished grief.
I genuinely don't know. Because it is to some extent, you could, and people do, literally have us collect from the hospital, and then the cremated remains are scattered in the garden of remembrance at the cemetery. So from the person dying, the family do not see them again, ever. They just vanish. The corpse has just gone. How healthy is that? I don't know. My gut feeling is not very, but I've got no evidence to support that.
Yeah, of course. I don't know if I heard somebody tell you, like, look, I never saw my dead mother and I regret it, or something similar. Like, I refuse to see my X person and I still regretting, or something similar. I think we're going to see the damages, if there are any, like in possibly 20 years or something. Because it's a huge change. That is becoming so simple, so almost unimportant.
Yeah. It's worth saying though, direct cremation is still very rare. It doesn't happen very often. We've done, I think, 2 this year, and both of them have been cases where there really has been no family relationship. The family have lived at the other end of the country or in a different country, and there has been no close relationship. In one case, the family was completely estranged. And that's why it's been a direct cremation. At the beginning of the pandemic, we did a few because people couldn't attend funerals, or only 6 people could attend funerals. So they said, well, let's not have the expense of a funeral. Let's pay for the direct cremation instead. And then when this is over, we will have a memorial service with the cremated remains. That you can understand that makes a lot more sense, because it's sort of, you know, desperate measures. But in normal circumstances, direct cremation is not common. It's very much. And
you
in
think it's
fact,
going to grow?
and Douglas will probably deny this, but when I first started in 2014, which is hugely depressing because here I am still doing the sodding thing, I told him something about direct cremation and he did not know what it was because he thought I was talking about something else, and I explained to him what direct cremation was and he had never heard of it at that stage. So, you know, if this is something he is now taking an interest in, it's something that's sort of come up in the last 6 years or so.
Yeah, now it's the.
But again, at that point, you would never ever see adverts for it on TV. This thing of companies and companies specializing in it is, I would say, the last 3 or 4 years.
Already, like advertising on TV is strange. Like, it's not. We have some advertising on the street, yes. We have one funeral home that is extremely famous for their advertising. It became a huge social network phenomenon. It's called TAFFO, TAFFO. If you look on it, because they start their social media manager, they start to create memes on that and what's happening in Italy, and it became a huge thing, huge. Now they start franchising. It's but they're like, their key element was this, making funny memes on that thing. They become very amazing about advertising.
We've got a company at the minute selling life insurance, and they are doing funny adverts basically about how everybody's going to die. Okay. And they're called Dead Good Life Insurance. Some people are hugely offended by it. Some people think it's brilliant. We have the Co-op, which is the biggest funeral home. They advertise from time to time on TV. The only other people that are advertising that I know of are these companies that specialize in direct cremation. They're advertising a lot.
Except from TAFFO, it's quite uncommon. And TAFFO became famous because it did something very unusual. Yeah. Because again, that is a taboo, and they put like a humoristic side on it, and they become huge. I think almost not all, but a lot of people know it. Like, I think one of the most followed page on Facebook in Italy. They become very famous, and smartly they start a franchise and everything. It will be interesting how it's going to change in Italy, the relationship with that, with this company. On TV, I think it will be unthinkable at the moment. And at the same time, I would like to say that we don't have national funeral homes. So it will make no sense to make a national advertised sound.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know if it's a fake memory, I saw one at the cinema, because here at the cinema, before the movie, you have some local stuff.
Yeah.
I don't remember if it's a true memory or not. But like on television, it's many years that I don't see television, but I will know it. Like, people will talk about it. On the street, yes, but it will make no economical sense.
Well, we have 2 really big companies, national companies. The Co-op is the first one, and Dignity is the second one. That used to be an American company. It was bought out. And then we've got Funeral Partners, which is probably the 3rd biggest, although it's a lot smaller. Then you've got a number of independents that have a lot of branches. And then you've got the small independents like us. But really, Co-op and Dignity are the giants. And they're the ones that lobby government and drive. They've made a huge fuss about this CMA legislation. They're really not happy.
Yeah, I think here, just recently, you are starting to look at funeral homes as a business stuff. Like, was usually they were family run.
Yeah.
And it was for money, for sure. I think it's a good job, but socially, like it's not like, yeah, like there's certain family that everybody knows. Here in Palermo, Calafiore is very famous. I think now it's changing, and people are starting to think like, oh, I could open a shop or a funeral home. And there is a local problem that's, I don't know how easy in places like Palermo is to have and run a funeral home with all the shady things going on, and with the cemetery. It's not an easy business. I'm quite sure I saw some new funeral home in town, and I would like to go and meet them. See, like, I would love to see some like young people that are like, oh, I'm going to try this business thing. But having a huge one, natural one, no, it's late. Not yet. Maybe in the future going to be a natural one, like something big, but it's not yet the cultural moment.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I'm going to
It's
have
late.
to go in about 15 minutes because we've got a family coming in to visit somebody in the chapel after all we've said about that.
Well, I have to go now because I have to
Okay.
cook.
After what we said.
And it was lovely.
Oh, it was. It was.